Okay. Hello, everyone. Today our guest is Margot, and she will be sharing a lived experience with us. I met Margot a few years ago at one of Kingsborough's club fairs, and since then she's been gracious enough to visit my class in person a couple of times, 2 or 3 times, and certainly virtually during the pandemic, visiting the class, sending film she's made for us for my class. And so uh, I will tell you that Margot is a filmmaker. She's a staunch advocate for people with disabilities, and she's a graduate of Kingsborough, an honors graduate from Kingsborough. So welcome, Margot, and she will tell you more about herself.
Thank you so much, Carol. It's always a pleasure to be here. Um, I have been uh, making films since 2010 under the name Crip Video Productions. And the story behind the name of that is I have a disability called cerebral palsy. And in the physical disability community, one of the things that we do is we reclaimed the word cripple, similar to how people in the LGBT community reclaimed the word queer, which used to be a slur and then, became a term of empowerment for people within the community. So, and this was before the very well known documentary Crip Camp came out. I liked when people shortened it from cripple to crip. I thought it was pretty badass. So I made that the name of my production company. And I started with my film Drama-Sided when I was 15. And then when I was at Kingsborough, I made a film called The Stroke of Endurance, which was about a real experience that I had with a professor that had a stroke halfway through the semester, and 3 weeks later came back during his recovery process, and sort of his disability experience as we observed it at the time. Um, and right now, I am a student at Penn State Harrisburg. I was forced to move from Brooklyn to Pennsylvania because this college that I'm at now had a better opportunity for accessibility. What I wanted was exactly what Kingsborough had been able to give me, which was certain accommodations involving classes in closer proximity. Some of the other places I looked at before I moved didn't offer this. But I absolutely need this because cerebral palsy, the way it is it's a brain injury that happened to me as a baby. It's like a stroke, but it manifests physically. So it gives me very tense muscles and very bad balance. So I use crutches and stuff, and I don't have much stamina. So I can't really spend too much time walking between classes without getting fatigue and pain. So the best option after Kingsborough and after the pandemic died down was to move, and I'm really enjoying this choice that I made, and I loved also my experience at Kingsborough, and I wouldn't change that for anything. So that's the basics.
All right. Tell us a little bit about your advocacy for people with disabilities. Tell me what you do. And I sort of know what you do. I've worked with you on a couple of occasions, but
Yeah.
tell us about that and why you're so adamant in being a part of advocacy.
Yeah, great question. So, my main part of my advocacy is my films because I noticed a pattern in the media and in society in general where the assumption was that disabled people are sort of miserable with the fact that they're disabled and that their lives are not worth as much as an able bodied person. This would be called ableism, where you kind of discriminate against a disabled person or see them as less because of the disability. So I wanted to do that, the films, to sort of change the narrative on that and say, no, our lives are worth something and we're happy living as disabled people. We still experience some of the discrimination and the challenges associated with that, but that doesn't mean we want to give up on life in any way. Um, and then what happened was, as I made these films, I made all these interesting connections with other advocacy groups through Kingsborough and other places that really seem to need my help and also value my films as, teaching tools or just something that would be of benefit to them. So I started doing public speaking like this to help students. And then I started, at the club at Kingsborough called Students Unlimited, which was an advocacy group within Kingsborough, which just had elections the other day for new officers and really needs more members. So, if any of the students listening to this are interested in disability advocacy, I would suggest contacting Students Unlimited by contacting Peter Santiago of Accessibility Services. He's the club advisor, and he will make sure that you're connected with the club. And you do not have to have a disability to be interested in disability advocacy or be interested in the club. Everybody is welcome, and all perspectives are welcomed. Because if somebody maybe doesn't have a disability but they noticed, like, maybe if this was accommodated a little differently, it would be a benefit to both, then everybody ends up better off in the end for that. And then I'm also with Carol part of something called CUNY Unlimited Fig, and I'm also part of something called IHE UK, and both of these are advocacy groups for integrating intellectually disabled and other neurodiverse people into the college system more, in the cases where they might have, like, say, an IEP diploma and they can't go through the usual routes of accessing the college system.
And yes, recently we were both on a panel with the big committee um,
Mhm.
for Disability Awareness Week back in April. Let me ask you this. It's important, the advocacy is important. It's important for people to be aware. In our class, we discuss um, as educators why it's important to be aware of the needs for students with disabilities. Of course, there's the laws that indicate that we must provide. But the question is that I ask you is, on an individual basis in the classroom, what can teachers do? And many of our students are going to be teaching in the lower grades, such as pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, so forth, elementary level. What can the teacher do as a result of your own experience in the classroom when they might be with a child who has a disability? What's the teacher's role there as a result of your experience and your thoughts?
Yeah, so just for a little bit of background context, I was in the regular public school system, and I did something called mainstream, where I was a disabled student that was in the general ed classroom, and I had like the same grading system and everything that a general ed student would have. For me, I felt this was beneficial because it challenged me academically, and it was understood that my particular disability was physical, and as far as the academics and the understanding of the material, I should be held to the same standard as an able-bodied student would be. There are people with a different kind of impairment where certain things may have to be modified, but I didn't need any of the academics itself modified. What I needed from the teachers is to understand that I write more slowly. So I need, a time extension on the assignment, and that I am much slower walking between classrooms, and that there's certain, like, for the kindergarten age, I couldn't really hold on to the scissors. So I needed like a scissor that was big with like a soft grip so I could actually hold on, so it was pretty simple stuff. And then there would, with cerebral palsy in particular, or, you might have some students that have visual impairments. Um, I had some visual issues with scantrons and like small circles and things like that, but I was not aware of it because I was a young child. I had no way of telling the teacher that I wasn't actually seeing what the other students were seeing. So you have to, kind of watch the kid and see, like, are they maybe not seeing all of the assignment? What pattern are you seeing? And then, you can't diagnose the kid with something, but if you start to notice a pattern where the kid's having trouble, you can let the parent know, like, hey, I'm noticing when so and so does this, there's a little bit of a problem with this. And just let the parent know, so if they notice that same pattern at home or in other environments, they know, like, to maybe have that evaluated, and then, like, the accommodation can be updated if the student is already diagnosed, or in the case of somebody that hasn't been diagnosed yet, you can pick up on something that in some cases can potentially be life-saving. I remember hearing another professor at Kingsborough, Jeremy Sawyer, saying that he had an experience where a student was thought to have one type of disability, but turns out he was having seizures. And the fact that this was picked up on by, like, an evaluation later on actually may have ended up saving this person. So, you just need to pay attention, not diagnose or assume, but just, like, notice patterns and see if you can, in the moment, help them. And then also follow up with the parent and listen to what the parent's saying. Because in my case, I had an IEP, but when my mom would suggest, like, I'm seeing this and this pattern with the homework and stuff, they didn't necessarily follow through on that. And they would give me accommodations that were more applicable to, say, a blind person than somebody with motor issues, where I just needed to learn where the keys were. I could see them, but I needed time to figure out how to move my fingers around on the keyboard, and that wasn't accommodated for because they kind of didn't know. So you just need to pay attention, be patient, and don't assume, I think, are the main tips I would give a teacher.
Yeah, I think you're right on target there. I mean, we talk
Yeah.
about how important it is for early educators to be observant and
Hmm.
to look at patterns, to see if there are any patterns, and to note take so that you have uh, information for the parent to look at and be aware that the child might need help, and that all has to do with early intervention. A good observant teacher
Oh,
can
yeah.
intervene early, right, and
Yeah.
get the child the early special accommodations that they require.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And like, one thing that I kind of picked up on from, working with kids, because I volunteered with some kids that were on the autism spectrum. What I noticed with them is sometimes things that would be mistaken for bad behavior, like, certain yelling and stuff. It was either because they couldn't talk the normal way, so they were trying to get attention, like, hey, something's wrong, or it was a pain response and it wasn't picked up as pain, but they were like, the kid was, like, maybe in a lot of pain from something that happened, like they fell or something and somebody didn't know, so they would start acting out, but they were trying to say, I'm in pain, but I don't know how to tell you I'm in pain. So, like, if you see a kid acting out, it might actually be because they're uncomfortable and they don't know how to tell you with those
And
kind of
yeah,
disabilities.
and autism, most teachers are bound to see a child in their class who might be autistic, because 1 in 44 children have been diagnosed. So it's very likely that you might have a child in your classroom with autism. And to be aware, just as you say, of the symptoms and of autism is important. And that's what we study in our class, not just autism, but of course, many other disabilities. Um,
Yep.
there's, of course, about the medical and social model for
Yes.
disabilities. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the basics of medical model, as I understand it, is you're diagnosing the person with something, and you're seeing the impairment that the person has, the disability itself, as the problem, and trying to, fix or cure that, or, it is, like, very treatment based and usually more towards the cure end of things. Whereas social model is saying our bodies are what they are, and society has to accommodate to us. So, like, instead of trying to make the person walk uh, when they can't, you're instead installing a ramp and saying, this ramp is going to benefit everybody because nobody likes to take the stairs if they don't have to. Plus, the wheelchair can get up the ramp. And a lot of these accommodations that you can make for a disabled person are actually very simple and very cost effective compared to some of the things that the medical establishment is doing, like, stem cell things. Like, I'm all for anybody getting the treatments that they feel that they need and want, but there's also balancing, like, is getting a person with very severe CP to stand up actually like the practical thing, or is that going to be wasting time when you could just accommodate the wheelchair and like make what they need in the classroom based on that, what they would use throughout their life to just be a functional, independent human being in the outside world. Because, like, the thing is, when you're working with disabled kids, remember, like, every one of them is going to grow into an adult. So anything that you can do that kind of teaches them, if I do this, it's not painful or it's easier, that's something that they're going to carry with them into adulthood and like apply to a job or something like that. Some of the basic things I learned in the young grades now I like apply to my job when I'm posting on social media for the theater I work for, like Teatro Paraguas, like little tricks for using the keyboard and stuff. Yeah, that was stuff that was learned young, so this stuff does carry over. So you're thinking about like long-term goals and accepting what the body is, and also seeing their potential and realizing that like they may not be able to do certain things now, but maybe when they're 10, 13, 14, they'll be able to do it. So kind of preparing them for both scenarios and just seeing how they develop and like what they actually want, like how far they want to go, because like sometimes disabled people are held back or given an expectation that's not realistic, and with disability you have to really be individualized. Like, the expression that I've heard is, if you met one person with CP, you've met one person with CP. Like, a lot of my actors, some of them have better motor control than I do, and some of my friends with it have less motor control than I do, even though it's the same disability, because it in each person the brain damage affects a different area. So, and this even though the brain thing is not always involved in these disabilities, like each person with that disability is going to have their own manifestation of that. So you have to tailor their needs to them specifically, not just assume, oh, it's Down syndrome, so they're all the same. It doesn't work like that at all.
And
Uh,
especially, yeah, like just like
yeah,
in autism, there's a spectrum,
right,
right? There's a
exactly.
spectrum. And
Yeah.
what you just said also speaks to two things. One of which was the fact that universal design, and we'll get to that in a moment, get back to that in a moment. And the other thing is, to try to focus on what the individual can do, not what they
Mhm.
can't do. You know?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
that idea of universal design helps to uh, develop or you know help them reach those things that they can do but need that accommodation. And universal design on college campuses, in a classroom, in terms of children coming to your classroom with a wheelchair. Well, you say, well, what's the problem? Well, the problem is they may not be able to fit under the table. The wheelchair may not be able to fit under the table, so they need to have a special table. All these, what we think may be simple things, are really tantamount to helping that individual reach success.
Yeah, I would say some of the simplest accommodations are like the ones that make the most impact for me. Like, just having the classes in closer proximity. Once that's set up, where like people are just like, oh yeah, let's just move this class even just 5 minutes closer, makes like a world of difference for me, to have that kind of setup. So I completely agree. And with universal design, one of the things I noticed recently, because I'm around disabled people a lot. I have a production crew that's almost entirely disabled people, and one of these people that I know, they had one disability, and then now that they're a little older, they're developing some new disabilities just because of health reasons, and some stuff that happened during the COVID and all that. And what we noticed is when they went back to school, some of the accommodations that were already in place, the idea of the universal design, because some of that was already in the course, they were able to just immediately start using that as a feature that they needed. Like something simple, like if you have audio description or captioning, even if the person doesn't need it right now, maybe something happens a week or two later where it's like, oh wait, the audio description actually benefits me, or the captions actually benefit me, and it can, benefit people that have like temporary problems too, like little if they have to have like a surgery or something, they come back to class and they're kind of using the same features that the disabled students have, and then they don't have to go through the whole thing of having to go through the office because you as the teacher have already provided that. So it makes a lot less steps for the disabled person to do themselves. I'm all for, advocating for yourself and being independent and stuff, but if the teacher can kind of build these access features into the course the same way that I did in my production, where like, on my films I have the audio description and the captions already, and I make sure that everything that I use is wheelchair accessible and stuff. If you build that into the course from the beginning, it's a lot less work for you in the long run, and it's a lot less work for the disabled person because they don't have to think, oh no, do I have to talk to the teacher about this? Do I have to go to the disability office? Or in the case of a parent, like, do I have to fight the IEP to get this? And then if it's already provided, nobody even has to ask any questions. It's just like, this is the class. I'm functioning the same way an able-bodied person does because it's already been provided to me. It's a lot less mental and emotional work. There's a certain amount of emotional labor that goes into, I have to think about this. And then, while we're also dealing with, physical stuff, family stuff, stuff with like a rental or whatever going on. Like we're having the same problems that everyone else is having with just regular life stuff. And then we have all these extra steps that we got to do to communicate what our needs are. If you can take some of that off our plate, then it's easier for everybody because we're also going to be in a better mood in your classroom and not have to like think about multiple things at once, and we're going to focus on the material.
And certainly for younger children who really can't advocate for themselves at 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, you know,
Mm-hmm.
in the very instant of being in the classroom that moment, as opposed to, the parent being there, if an accommodation can be made where certain things like as pencil grips, for instance, or recognizing that maybe the child's development isn't such that they can hold a pencil. Maybe they need a larger instrument to write with, for their grip. So simple, what seemingly we think might be simple is, as just as you said, is a major thing. And so it's really the responsibility in the classroom, I believe, for the teacher to advocate for the child. Just as you say, get it done while you can, while you see it happening, do it. It makes it a lot easier for the child. And that actually speaks to inclusive uh, teaching, inclusive classroom. And the inclusive classroom is beneficial to the disabled child, but it's also beneficial to the other children as well. Would you like to speak to that a bit?
Yeah. So, like for, a child that is not disabled, if they see somebody being accommodated in the classroom and it's just a natural part of the class and there's no like big hullabaloo about it, they're going to see that accommodation as normal. So, when they go into like the adult world of employment, or if they have a child that's disabled, it's like, wait, I remember that my teacher did XYZ for this other student. Now, maybe my child needs the same thing. I know what to ask for. This is a natural thing. I don't think it's weird. I'm not going to be as judgmental because I've already seen this, and they're not making a big deal like this kid is special and needs to be separated off. It's all integrated into their development of, how to treat another person, that you treat somebody with respect, and you're patient with them if they're having trouble, or expressing things in a different way. And it teaches them communication skills about like how to communicate your needs and stuff if they see other disabled students doing that. And like just because your kid starts out able bodied, like doesn't mean that the disability won't come later in life, and then they won't be so scared of it. Like somebody that goes blind later in life, if they've seen a blind student being accommodated, they know I can go back to school because I've already seen that blind students are accommodated and I don't have to be scared of that. So
Leads to
things
a
like that.
kinder society, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
And
Because
that's
society needs a lot more patience and just like an understanding that like not everything is about going fast and all that. You know.
and many of my students are already working in the Department of Education as
Excellent.
paraprofessionals. Yeah, and they
Mhm.
share some stories in their writing about how they work with children, and I think it's wonderful. And they really truly understand patience, and without question, it benefits both the child who's being accommodated and the other children in the class. I I I would say that one of the other things teachers might do, should do, is to introduce reading materials, children's books at the early age of 3, 4, 5 years old in the classrooms when they're doing read alouds to include books with children with disabilities. You seem like you want to speak to that.
Yes, I do, because I'm actually doing something very exciting related to that. I have a friend that is disabled, and we noticed that there was, kind of a lack of material for younger children, educational material. So we started out by doing a reading on YouTube of a wonderful book, which I suggest for any teacher or any para that is working with a young, particularly physically disabled child, but it can apply to any disabled child. It's a children's book called All the Way to the Top by Annette Bay Primatel. And the story is the story of how the Americans with Disability Act was passed, but from the point of view of a little girl with cerebral palsy that was like around 9 years old at the time, who actually climbed up the Capitol steps on her hands and knees in order to get it passed. She felt that, nobody is listening to disabled people. I have to, put a physical strain on my body to make a point. And she scrambled all the way up there and ended up in the news. And she was one of the main reasons that it passed. And so we did a wonderful reading of this book. And then we're starting to put out other books. We're going to put out some material about like other disabled figures like Helen Keller. And, there's also material that this person that's disabled, they are Jewish and they're studying to be a rabbi. So they're also putting some, interesting material related to like Jewish history in there too. But all of the videos have elements of like disability pride. It's all very child friendly, very easy to understand. And the way you find those videos is to just look up Dylan Rothbein on YouTube. And like the videos will, like each video is in two parts. One part is the reading of the actual book. And then the other part is like a kind of a Q&A explaining certain elements of the plot. And we split them into two parts to help the kids who have shorter attention spans, or, if you want to use it as a teaching tool, you can use certain parts and not others. So it's a little bit more easily accessible. And at
That
some point, we're going to put like captions and audio descriptions on those as well. These are just the earlier versions without those features yet, because it takes time to make those features.
Yeah, that first book you spoke about, All the
Yeah.
Way to the Top, how one girl's fight for Americans with disabilities changed everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that's a tremendous book. The other
Yes.
thing, there's a book called Mama Zooms, and this isn't about a child who has a disability, but a child's mother who has a disability. And
Exactly.
so that's a little bit unusual, and I think that's a terrific book because it acquaints the child with the fact that other moms might have or dads might have a disability, and you know there are things you can do uh, that, for instance, you may not be able to walk along with your mom, but you can certainly sit on her lap on the wheelchair, and it sort of normalizes that for the child when they see books like that.
Exactly. They're seeing, an example of something that's possible. Like, because I spend so much time around people that are visually impaired, and I know women that are visually impaired and have children. When I talk to other people that are maybe new to that, who are like nervous about like parenting and stuff, it's like, oh, I've already seen it. There's plenty of parents that are blind or in wheelchairs or have cerebral palsy, and they're able to raise their kids just fine. Um, a really good book for adults, if you've seen Crip Camp and you want to see kind of a follow up to that, there's a book called The Question of David, by one of the women that was in Crip Camp, and it's about her journey of adopting another baby who was thought to be having cerebral palsy. At that time, she has cerebral palsy herself, so does her husband. So it's two wheelchair users raising a very active little baby, and them trying to, figure out how to be parents and how to accommodate themselves. Like she used kind of a like a cross body thing to hold the baby in the chair when he was tiny, and then as he got bigger and bigger, he would sit on the wheelchair, and they would change their accommodation as the baby started growing. And it was just a really good example of seeing, like, how a disabled person parents,
Yeah, well, we'll
yeah.
I'll have a list of books when we move on during the semester. But
Yes.
the Association for Library Science for Children, ALS, is a great organization that provides lists of books uh, which can be used in the classroom to discuss, children with disabilities, and as I said, even parents with disabilities. So again, bringing these materials into the classroom uh, uh, for the child, not only the children with disabilities, but also those without. Uh, again, introduces everyone early on to different circumstances that people exist under. And,
Exactly.
and so, what do you have scheduled for the future? Anything coming up for you? Any?
Well, film wise, I am making a documentary. It takes a long time to make a documentary, but I'm making a documentary called What the Body Believes with another professor here at Kingsborough. And it's about me and my actors and crew from Crip Video Productions and how we've made an impact on CUNY students and some other disability news going on within CUNY are also in the film. And it's going to be again fully accessible with audio description and open captions upon its release. We're still sort of in an editing type of process with it and making sure we have all the pieces together, but it is coming. And I am eventually going to be writing more of my own films aside from the documentary. But because I'm in classes now and taking a math class, which math is not my best subject, you can see why my writing has been a little slowed down.
Well, any list recommendations for teachers in the classroom? Um, the yes, we teachers in the classroom are will be facing situations where they will have uh, children with uh, different disabilities. We mentioned physical disabilities, um, you know, but also disabilities that may not be so evident.
Yeah, so I will speak to that. I know many people that have what's called invisible disability.
Right.
So the person will appear, physically and otherwise to be like an able-bodied student, but they actually are having, maybe a lot of trouble in the class with like one aspect of something because they physically can't process it or they can't mentally process it the same way, but they don't look it. So one of the biggest things with them, if you have a student that's having issues like that and you're not sure,
Like
is
this,
to,
like dyslexia, for instance.
yeah, dyslexia, certain milder forms of autism you may not be able to
Yes.
tell,
Right.
chronic fatigue syndrome you can't tell, or like something like diabetes even can affect how they're functioning in the class, like if their
Right.
blood sugar is off. So I think in a situation like that, if you see that the person's having a problem, instead of assuming that they're like a lazy student or not following through, try to, watch the pattern. And if they tell you, hey, I think something is wrong, or like I'm not physically comfortable or whatever, like something like that, the first thing you can do is like at least initially believe them and say, okay, I believe that something is off here, and we're going to try to accommodate that somehow, instead of assuming that the kid's just trying to get attention. Because if something's wrong, the kid's going to let you know, and they're not always just like, oh, pay attention to me, and like trying to manipulate you. Sometimes something is seriously wrong, and you just can't physically see it, but they're trying to tell you. Especially with young kids who don't have like the body language or the verbal language skills to say, hey, something's hurt, or I can't see something, or like I'm really not feeling well, or something like that. you
And
know
utilizing that time when parents drop off children and when they pick up the children, using that time maybe to initiate a conversation with the parents, build a relationship with the parents, and hear the child's story through the parent.
Yeah,
You
I would definitely say engage with the parent more, because that's one of the things that my teachers didn't do. They didn't try to make that kind of relationship. And also, like, if the parent wasn't happy with something, they immediately assumed that the parent was against them. But it might just be like, I know my kid, and I know that they need this specific thing. I'm not against you as a teacher. So don't be like defensive with the parents. Hear them out first and see where they're coming from. And then they'll, most of the time they will extend that same grace to you and see what you're up against. Because, like, teachers know that it's not always easy to provide certain accommodations. So if you're working together with the parent, maybe the parent can bring something in from home that the child already has. So you don't have to, try to scramble and get it yourself. You know, disabled people and their parents tend to know what accommodations are needed, and sometimes they just need like a teacher or like a counselor or something to sign a piece of paper that says this person can bring this thing in, so like the school doesn't have to finance this. The kid's happy because it's what they're used to, and it's the right size and everything, so you don't
And
have
it
that
gets done
problem.
faster
Right, it's
sometimes.
much faster.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes faster. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's well, as I said, in my classes, I have several students who are working with students with disabilities, and you know, again, their stories with their experiences, um, indicate that they recognize that patience is very key to working with all children in general, and
Oh
maybe
yeah.
particularly with those children and parents with disabilities.
Oh yeah. And since some of them were paras, my advice for a para, because I had many of them were very good. Some of them were not so good. The ones that were not so good, they, instead of waiting for me to kind of tell them what I could and couldn't do, they would write up the whole assignment, and I wouldn't pick up on, the writing format that they were using. So I didn't even learn MLA format until I got to Kingsborough, because somebody was scribing and not showing me what they were scribing, and doing a little too much of the work themselves, which tired them out as well. So you gotta, communicate with the kid with the extent that they're able to communicate to you, like what part they actually went up with. And also, one of the things that the PARs did is sometimes they would be a little too physically close to me, which was kind of a detriment to my social interaction, because, little girls, they wanted to share secrets and stuff with me, but I got this adult next to him, and it's like, I don't want the adult to know that I wet my bed, and things like that, that we were
Yeah.
discussing in private as children. We talk about these things, but we don't want the adults to know. That's embarrassing. So, like, when the kid is playing, watch them for safety, but back off just a little bit so they could feel like, independent, and that they're developing and able to interact with somebody else. Disabled people don't like somebody on top of them all the time. um, again, they have to develop a sense of like how to deal with some of their anxieties and stuff on their own too, but they shouldn't be like forced to do something on their own if they tell you that they absolutely can't. And it's not just fear based, but like related to some physical thing. You have to
And,
push
and
kids in the right direction for psychological things, but you can't force somebody that can't physically do something to do something, you know.
and maybe maybe it's okay to present the challenge uh,
Right.
to a child with a disability. If they're having a little problem, don't immediately run to their aid. Observe it maybe, and help them through it. But let just as you would challenge a regular education student,
Hmm.
it's okay to challenge a child with disabilities, would you say? Or
Oh yeah, definitely. Because we want a little bit of that challenge because that shows that you're respecting us and treating us the same way as the able-bodied student. One of the things that I like that this was a professor that did this in one of my biology classes. I said I might need an accommodation for so and so thing, and he said for one day. Could you try without it just to see if it works? Because I see from what your level of motor impairment is that you may not have as much of a problem as you think you do. And I said, okay, I'll try it. And it actually was not that bad. I didn't need it modified it quite as much as I thought I needed. I still needed some modification in that class, but I didn't need quite as much as I thought because I didn't understand what the material was until I actually like felt it with my hand and saw how big it was. It was like, we were dealing with slides and stuff, and he knew that you had to kind of, feel that physically to know what you're able to do. So he said, just try it. If you need the accommodation, I'm not going to deny it to you, but just try this one thing just to see what happens. And you can do that same thing with a kid, like try this. If you hate it, we'll stop, but just try it, see if anything works. If it doesn't, like, no judgment. That's how you deal with kids. That way, if something doesn't work, they don't feel like they can't come to you, and they won't try to hide it from you if they can't. Kids, if they're embarrassed, they might try to hide certain things, and then you have the communication breakdown because they're nervous and they think that the teacher's going to yell at them or something if they can't. So you always have to, like, try it. It's okay if you can't. That's how you challenge a kid.
so final word?
Final word is I wish you luck as you become teachers. And if you need anything, you can certainly contact me at my website is cripvideoproductions.com, and there's an email address there, cripvideoproductions@yahoo.com. If you have any additional questions or comments, all of the films are available on my website. If you just go to cripvideoproductions.com and scroll over the film tab, the names of the films pop up on each tab. You can click on it, and the audio described versions and the captioned versions and everything will all be there in any version that you want. Obviously, also the book readings I mentioned are at Dylan Rothbein, which is a YouTube channel, and that's the last name is spelled Rothbein, and the other part is just the way that you would normally spell Dylan,
And
Dylan.
I'll provide some of that material
Yeah, I'll
on
send it
students
to you
later
as
on.
well so you can link it.
Okay, so Margot, again, your experience and knowledge has provided a deeper understanding of the challenges and triumphs of people with disabilities. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.